I used to believe our life was perfect. 12 years of marriage, a beautiful home in Barton Creek, a career that kept me comfortably busy, and a wife who was admired by everyone she met. Madison Turner, my wife, was a fitness instructor full of energy and charisma, the kind of woman who could light up a room with her presence. And I, Ethan Cole, a marketing manager in the automotive industry, thought I had done something right in life. Every morning followed a rhythm. She'd wake before dawn, slip into her workout clothes, kiss me on the cheek and whisper, "See you later, babe." I'd head to work, return by 6, and find her preparing one of her healthy dinners, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, a glass of white wine. We'd eat in front of the big windows overlooking Austin's skyline. I loved that view. It made everything feel solid, safe, permanent. But that Thursday night shattered the illusion I had built for more than a decade. It started quietly. Madison came home later than usual. She was dressed beautifully, hair still damp from a shower at the gym, her skin glowing under the soft kitchen light. Yet her eyes, they didn't meet mine. Not once. She placed her gym bag down, sat across from me at the dining table, and said nothing for almost a full minute. The only sound came from the ticking wall clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then she exhaled, a deep, uneasy breath, and said, "Ethan, I want to start over. Alone." The words hung in the air, sharp and surreal. I blinked, thinking I'd misheard her. "What do you mean?" I asked, forcing a smile that felt wrong on my face. "I need to find myself," she said softly, staring at the table instead of me. "I don't know who I am anymore. I've been living a life that doesn't feel like mine." It sounded rehearsed, like something taken from one of those self-help podcasts she listened to on her morning runs. "Find yourself," I repeated, my voice cracking slightly. "Madison, we built this life together. What's missing?" She didn't answer. She just kept her hands clasped, eyes glistening. I felt the air thicken between us, heavy with something unspoken. I wanted to reach across the table to hold her hand, but something inside me froze. Her expression wasn't one of confusion, it was one of decision. This wasn't a cry for help. This was a statement. A declaration. That night I barely slept. I lay awake listening to the faint sound of her moving around the guest room. The scent of her new perfume lingered in the air, something floral and unfamiliar. It didn't smell like her usual lavender. It smelled foreign. At dawn she left early for the gym. I watched her car disappear down the driveway, a silver SUV glinting under the Texas sun. My chest tightened. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Hours later, when I walked into the living room, her laptop sat open on the desk, screen dimmed but still unlocked. Madison was careful with her privacy. She always closed everything, logged out of everything. But that morning she hadn't. Curiosity and dread battled in my chest. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. I didn't want to look. I knew that once I did, there would be no going back. But a small part of me, the part that needed to understand, took control. The screen lit up. Folders. Dozens of them. Then one caught my eye. It was labeled personal. I clicked. Inside were emails, not work-related, not family-related. They were personal indeed. I opened the first one. My heart stopped. "Can't wait to see you tonight," it read. "You make me feel alive again." Signed Ryan. Ryan Carter. Her personal trainer. My stomach turned. I scrolled through more messages. Each one was worse than the last. Not just affectionate but strategic. Plans. Budgets. A project titled Madison's Pilates Studio. They were discussing an investment of $100,000 from Ryan, and $50,000 taken from our shared account. Without my knowledge. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. I clicked another document, a draft legal note outlining division of assets, suggesting ways to secure the house under her name after divorce. It wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated destruction. I sat there motionless. My body refused to react. No shouting. No smashing things. Only a hollow silence filling the room. The sun climbed higher outside the window, painting golden streaks across the hardwood floor. I stared at the laptop until the light turned orange and faded. My whole world had shifted in a single afternoon. That night, Madison came home humming softly as if nothing had happened. I watched her unpack groceries, her face calm, her voice light when she asked, "Want me to make dinner?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I was living with a stranger. When she finally noticed my silence, she tilted her head. "What's wrong?" I forced a faint smile. "Nothing," I said. "Just thinking." She nodded and turned away, never noticing how my eyes followed her every move, not with love, but with the quiet awareness of a man who had seen the truth. In that moment, I decided I wouldn't explode. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of chaos. No, I would be calm, strategic, just like her. And tomorrow, I'd begin taking back everything she thought she could steal from me. The next morning, the world looked the same, but nothing felt the same. The sunlight streaming through the kitchen window didn't warm me anymore. The sound of coffee dripping into the pot felt distant, like it belonged to someone else's life. Madison was humming again, dressed in her gym clothes, black leggings, white tank top, hair pulled into that perfect ponytail she knew I liked. She smiled at me, that practiced, glowing smile. "Morning, babe," she said, as if last night had never happened. I nodded, my throat tight. "Morning." She poured herself a protein shake, grabbed her gym bag and kissed me lightly on the cheek before walking out. The faint scent of her perfume, that new one I now despised, lingered behind. The moment her car disappeared down the driveway, I exhaled a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My hands shook as I reached for my phone. I called a name I hadn't said in years. Michael Donovan. Michael was an old college friend, now one of the best divorce attorneys in Austin. I didn't explain much on the phone. Just a few words. "It's about Madison. I found something." His voice dropped, sharp and professional. "Come to my office. Now." By 10, I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city. Michael listened without interrupting as I described everything: the emails, the stolen money, the plan to take the house. I showed him screenshots I had copied onto a flash drive before leaving home. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said quietly, "She's playing dirty. But you're lucky you found this now. We'll hit first." I nodded. My heart pounded, but not from fear anymore. From focus. Michael drafted the paperwork that same morning. The petition for divorce. The financial statement. The request for asset protection. Every signature I gave felt like a quiet act of war. By noon, the papers were filed. When I drove home, the house felt like a set, beautiful but empty. Madison's laughter no longer echoed through the halls. It was replaced by the low hum of the air conditioning and the faint ticking of the clock. I sat at the kitchen island, staring at the marble countertop where we'd once celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. Now it would be the stage for something else entirely. Hours later, when Madison returned, I was waiting. I had set her laptop on the table, open, the emails displayed on the screen. Every secret laid bare. She stopped in the doorway, the grocery bag slipping from her hands. Her face drained of color. "Ethan, what?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I just looked at her. "You wanted to start over. Alone. Well, you're about to get that chance." Her lips trembled. "Ethan, please let me explain." "There's nothing left to explain," I interrupted. "You've been planning this for months. The money, the business, the house. You thought you could lie to me and walk away with everything. But you were sloppy." Tears welled in her eyes. "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think." My voice was steady, colder than I'd ever heard it. "I filed the papers today. You have 24 hours to leave this house." Her mouth fell open. You already filed?" "Yes." She took a step forward, shaking. "Ethan, please. I made a mistake. I was confused. Ryan doesn't care about you," I cut in. "You'll find that out soon enough." The truth was, I had already called the gym's management earlier that afternoon. I'd sent them copies of the emails detailing their relationship and the misuse of client information. They promised to handle it internally. I knew what that meant: termination. Madison collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. I stood there, silent. There was no joy in it, no sense of victory. Only the quiet satisfaction of reclaiming control. When she finally looked up, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Ethan, please don't ruin my life." I stared at her for a long time. "You already did that yourself." That night I didn't sleep. I stayed on the porch, watching the moon drift behind thin clouds. Inside, Madison packed her things in silence. I heard the faint thuds of drawers closing, zippers sliding. At one point, she paused in the doorway as if she wanted to say something. I didn't turn around. By morning she was gone. Her side of the closet was empty. Her perfume bottles missing from the dresser. A single wedding photo still hung in the hallway, tilted slightly. I walked up to it, stared for a moment and then removed it from the wall. The nail left a tiny hole, a small imperfection in an otherwise perfect surface, just like our marriage. I placed the photo face down in the trash bin and whispered, "You wanted freedom. Now you have it." As the sun rose over Austin, I realized the calm I felt wasn't peace. It was the quiet that comes before a storm. Because I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The morning she left, the air inside the house felt hollow. Every sound echoed, the soft thump of the refrigerator door, the faint creak of the hallway floorboards. Madison's absence didn't feel like peace, it felt like a haunting. 12 years of memories lingered in every corner. The faint scent of her shampoo, the indentation on her pillow, the lipstick stain on the rim of her favorite mug. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the digital clock on the oven. At 03 a.m. She had 16 hours left. I wasn't counting out of cruelty. I was counting because my mind refused to be still. Every tick of the second hand reminded me of what she had done, of the life she'd planned to build without me, with him. By mid-morning, I opened my laptop and began cleaning house in the digital sense. I changed passwords, froze accounts, and redirected every automatic payment. The process was mechanical, methodical. Madison had once teased me for being too organized. She had no idea that same precision would one day protect me from her. Around noon, the call came from the gym. The manager's tone was clipped and polite. "Mr. Cole, thank you for providing the information. We verified everything. The situation has been handled." "Handled?" I repeated quietly after hanging up. I imagined Ryan Carter, her trainer, her secret partner, being called into an office, blinds drawn, his face pale as the truth unfolded. Madison would be next. I didn't take pleasure in it. I just wanted accountability. By evening, she returned. Her car pulled into the driveway slowly, as if the weight of what waited inside was too much to bear. She stepped through the front door wearing sunglasses, though the sun had already set. Her shoulders slumped under the weight of defeat. "Ethan," she began, voice trembling. "They fired me. Both of us. Ryan, he said he can't talk to me anymore. He said it's too risky." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You didn't expect loyalty from him, did you?" Her eyes flashed with something between anger and despair. "You ruined everything." "No," I said evenly. "You ruined us. I just made sure the damage didn't spread any further." She took a shaky breath. "Where am I supposed to go?" "You have 24 hours, I reminded her. "Now you have less than 4. Madison's eyes filled with tears. She walked to the dining table, the same one where she'd ended our marriage days before, and sank into a chair. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "It just happened." I almost laughed at that. Just happened. As if betrayal were an accident, like spilling coffee or forgetting to set an alarm. I wanted to tell her that cheating was a choice repeated 1,000 times. A message answered, a secret kept, a lie told until it became routine. But I didn't. I just looked at her and saw a stranger wearing the face of the woman I once loved. The hours dragged on. She packed slowly, pausing to touch things she'd forgotten about. Old photographs, souvenirs from our travels, a birthday card I'd written years ago. I watched from a distance, expressionless. Every object she touched seemed to drain more life from her. At midnight, she stood by the door, a suitcase in each hand. Her eyes were red, her cheeks streaked with dried tears. "I don't know how to fix this," she said softly. "You can't," I replied. "You already made your choice." She nodded, biting her lip. "Goodbye, Ethan." I didn't answer. The door closed quietly behind her, followed by the faint sound of her car starting. Then silence. For a long time, I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the door she'd just walked through. The clock on the wall ticked softly, each second a reminder that she was truly gone. But beneath the exhaustion, beneath the ache, something unexpected stirred inside me. Relief. I went upstairs, opened the window, and let the night air fill the room. The cicadas hummed in the distance. Austin's skyline glowed faintly beyond the trees. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The next morning I called Michael. "She's gone," I said. "Good," he replied. "Now we finish this properly." The following weeks blurred into a routine of paperwork, legal consultations, and cold professionalism. Michael handled everything with surgical precision. When the court date came, Madison didn't look at me once. She appeared smaller, thinner, a shadow of the woman she'd once been. The judge's voice was steady and final. "The property remains in the name of Mr. Cole. The respondent will receive 30% of liquid assets, reduced by the 50,000 misused funds." Madison didn't protest. She just nodded, eyes distant. When it was over, I stepped outside the courthouse into the warm Texas sun. The city noise felt distant, muffled by the pounding of my heart. The war was over. I had survived. But as I walked toward my car, a thought settled deep in my mind. I didn't just want to survive. I wanted to live again. It's strange how silence can be both comforting and cruel. After Madison left, the house felt enormous. Every room echoed with memories, laughter from long-forgotten dinners, the faint echo of music from weekend mornings, the warmth that once filled the kitchen now replaced by a stillness that bordered on eerie. At first, I kept expecting to hear her voice. To see her walk through the door, sweaty from a workout, tossing her keys onto the counter. But days turned into weeks and she never came back. Eventually, the silence stopped feeling foreign. It became mine. I threw myself into routine. Work became my anchor. I started staying later at the office, volunteering for projects I used to avoid. My coworkers noticed the change. Some called it dedication, but I knew it was survival. The more I buried myself in numbers, campaigns, and deadlines, the less time I had to think about what had been taken from me. One Friday night, I sat at my desk long after everyone else had left, the glow of my computer screen reflecting off a half-empty cup of coffee. I opened a file from months ago, one of Madison's gym marketing proposals. I stared at her name in the header. For a moment, the anger flared again, but then something inside me softened. I realized I didn't hate her anymore. Not really. I pitied her. A few days later, I called a contractor. I want to remodel the house, I said. Everything. The man laughed. Everything? Everything, I repeated. Within a week, the sounds of hammers, drills, and saws filled the air. Walls came down, floors were replaced, and sunlight poured into spaces that had once felt heavy with old memories. The house slowly transformed, lighter, brighter, freer. As if I were rebuilding not just a home, but a version of myself I had forgotten. One afternoon, while supervising the workers, I found an old box buried deep in the garage. Inside were things I hadn't seen in years, letters from college, travel photos, and a small collection of hiking gear coated in dust. I smiled faintly. Before marriage, before the long years of comfort and repetition, I used to love the outdoors. Madison had never cared for it. Too sweaty, she'd always say. So that weekend I decided to go alone. The Texas hill country stretched endlessly under a golden sky. The trails wound through cedar trees and limestone cliffs, the air thick with the scent of wildflowers. It felt strange at first, walking without a plan, without anyone waiting at home. But the rhythm of my steps, the crunch of gravel beneath my boots, the sound of birds overhead, it all started to calm me. I stopped at a clearing overlooking a small valley and sat on a rock, letting the wind brush against my face. For the first time in months, I didn't feel angry or bitter or broken. I just felt alive. That's when I heard a voice behind me. Beautiful view, isn't it? I turned to see a woman, maybe in her mid-30s, wearing a faded baseball cap and hiking backpack. She had warm brown eyes and a sunburned nose, the kind of look that spoke of time spent outdoors rather than in front of mirrors. Yeah, I said. It's perfect. She smiled and offered her hand. Lauren Matthews. I'm a veterinarian in Dripping Springs. You? Ethan Cole, I replied, shaking her hand. Marketing. And apparently a beginner hiker. She laughed softly. You're doing fine. Most people don't even make it this far on their first try. We ended up walking together for the rest of the trail. Conversation came easy, nothing forced, nothing performative. She talked about her clinic, about rescuing animals, about her divorce 2 years ago that left her rebuilding from the ground up. There was something disarmingly honest about her, something real. When we reached the end of the trail, she said, "You should come back next weekend. There's a longer route, a bit tougher but worth it." I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. Maybe I will. And I did. The weeks that followed turned into something unexpectedly peaceful. Lauren and I began hiking every Saturday. Then coffee after. Then dinners. She never pushed, never asked too much. We just existed in each other's space, quiet, steady, and genuine. One night, as we sat on her porch, the cicadas singing in the distance, she looked at me and said, "You know, you have this calm energy. Like someone who's been through a storm and finally found the eye of it." I thought about Madison. About the house. About how much I had lost and how much I had gained. Maybe, I said softly. Or maybe I'm just learning how to breathe again. She smiled. That's the best start anyone can have. As the months passed, I began to rebuild more than walls or routines. I rebuilt trust, hope, and maybe love. I stopped trying to erase the past and started accepting it as part of who I was. For the first time since that Thursday night, life didn't feel like something I had to endure. It felt like something waiting to be lived. And I was ready to live it. 2 years passed, and life had settled into a rhythm I could finally call peace. The house was no longer a monument to what had been lost. It was a reflection of who I'd become. The walls were brighter, the air lighter, and laughter, genuine, unforced laughter, filled it again. Lauren's laughter. She had a way of bringing calm to chaos, of grounding me when my thoughts wandered too far into the past. We weren't in a rush. There were no grand declarations, no promises whispered too early. Just steady companionship. Dinners at home, hikes through the hill country, long conversations under the Texas night sky. Sometimes, when the wind carried the faint scent of jasmine, I would remember Madison. But the memories no longer hurt. They were like photographs of a life that no longer belonged to me, faded, untouchable. That was why I didn't recognize her at first. It was a Saturday morning, warm and bright, the kind that made Austin feel alive. Lauren and I had stopped at a cafe downtown after walking through the farmer's market. The place was buzzing, soft jazz playing, espresso machines hissing, people talking over the hum of the city outside. I was halfway through my coffee when I looked up, and there she was. Madison. She stood at the counter, her shoulders drawn tight beneath a faded denim jacket. Her hair was shorter, unevenly cut, her once radiant face pale under the soft cafe lights. There were faint lines around her eyes, not of age but of exhaustion. She looked small. For a moment the world around me blurred. Time folded in on itself. The memories came rushing back. The Thursday night, the laptop screen, the tears. But they didn't hurt the way they used to. I just watched, silent, detached, like an observer of someone else's story. Lauren noticed my stillness. "Ethan?" she asked quietly. I cleared my throat. "It's someone I used to know." Madison turned then, coffee in hand, and her eyes found mine. For a second she froze. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. The color drained from her face. She took a hesitant step forward. "Ethan." Her voice cracked. I nodded once. "Madison." She looked at Lauren, then back at me. "You look good," she said softly, her eyes wet. "Different." "So do you," I said, though we both knew it wasn't true. There was a pause, long and heavy. The sounds of the cafe faded into a dull murmur. For a fleeting moment, I saw the woman I'd once loved, the one who'd danced barefoot in the kitchen, who'd laughed so easily. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone worn down by her own choices. "How have you been?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I've been fine," I said simply. "Better, actually." She nodded slowly, biting her lip. "I heard you kept the house." "I did." "And her?" She glanced briefly at Lauren. I looked at Lauren, who smiled politely, unaware of the history unfolding before her. "Her name's Lauren," I said. "She's good for me." Madison's eyes flickered with something. Regret, maybe envy, maybe both. She opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. Finally she whispered, "I'm glad you found peace." I studied her for a moment, and something inside me loosened. The anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak, all of it dissolved into something quieter. Acceptance. "Me too," I said. Madison hesitated, then gave a small, tired smile. "Goodbye, Ethan." She turned and walked away, her figure shrinking as she disappeared into the crowd outside. I watched her until she was gone. Lauren reached across the table, resting her hand over mine. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm okay." And I meant it. Outside, the city hummed with life. Cars rolled by, sunlight bounced off the glass windows, and the world moved forward, just as it should. As we left the cafe, Lauren slipped her hand into mine, and I realized something profound. Madison had once begged for a chance to start over, and I'd given it to her. But in the end, I was the one who truly did. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. But out of growth. Because sometimes the greatest closure isn't found in confrontation or apology. It's found in becoming someone who no longer needs either. And as we walked down the sunlit streets of Austin, I finally understood. The past didn't define me anymore. It had simply prepared me for the peace I had now.